I remember the morning it all ended like it happened yesterday. The air was dry the way it always is in Albuquerque this time of year. I arrived early at the JetLink Airways headquarters, my routine for the last 16 years. Uniform pressed, tie centered, shoes polished. Even after all this time, I still carried myself like I did in the Air Force. Discipline never leaves you, not really. I wasn't just a pilot, I was a mentor, a trainer, and for many a second, father in the cockpit. The kind of guy who took the red eye on Christmas because someone else had kids at home. But loyalty doesn't always translate to value, at least not the kind that fits on a spreadsheet. At 9:03 a.m., I was called into a meeting. Brent Layton, the new chief optimization officer, sat behind his desk like he'd done this 100 times. He didn't look at me, didn't offer a handshake. His screen reflected off his glasses as he scrolled through something I wasn't allowed to see. "Your role is being phased out as part of the restructuring," he said flatly. I blinked, just once. I wasn't confused, I was insulted. I had flown more hours than most of the flight ops team combined. Signed off promotions, created emergency training protocols, even built the flight crew evaluation criteria they now use to replace me. But Brent never paused. "Your compensation no longer aligns with market efficiency metrics." I wanted to ask what he thought efficiency meant in an industry where a single mistake could cost lives, but I didn't. I nodded. Once. He slid a white envelope across the table. I didn't open it. Through the window behind him, I could see Flight 8832 rolling toward the runway. Captain Zach Monroe was in the left seat today. I trained him myself, pushed him harder than he liked, but he made it through. And now he was flying while I sat in an office being erased. "Anything else?" I asked. Brent still didn't look up. "HR is expecting you downstairs." As I stood, he finally added, "We'll need your badge and jacket before you leave the building." In the locker room, I removed my uniform with slow, steady hands. I folded each piece carefully, just like I had during my first week in the Air Force more than 3 decades ago. My captain's hat went on top last. On the inside of my locker was a photo taped there for years. It was my first crew at JetLink. All smiles. Most of them captains now. I closed the locker without a sound. Outside, Rachel Kim, the company's head instructor, was waiting for me with a somber look and a clipboard in hand. She didn't say much. She didn't need to. As we walked to the elevator, my phone buzzed. "Noah A. Is it true?" I didn't answer, not yet. The elevator doors closed. My reflection stared back at me in the brushed steel. I barely recognized the man in uniform. Downstairs, the exit process took less than 15 minutes. Badge. Badge access card. Company phone. "Any personal items in the flight ops room?" the HR rep asked. "Just memories," I said. On my way out of the building, I stopped by the pilot's lounge, not because I had to, but because something told me I wasn't done. Rachel was there along with Daniel Ruiz as senior captain and one of my oldest colleagues, and Noah, fresh off an overnight route. The room went quiet when I stepped inside. "Is it true?" Noah asked again. I nodded. "Effective immediately," I said. "No drama, just, they're going in a different direction." "Yeah," Rachel muttered, "a cheaper one." We sat in silence for a few seconds. The weight of it all settled in the air between us. No one said it out loud, but we were all thinking the same thing. What kind of company sacrifices its backbone just to look better on paper? "You trained half this airline," Daniel said. "This isn't right." "Doesn't matter," I replied. "It's done. Don't risk your own careers because of me." But I saw the look in their eyes. Anger, confusion, loyalty, and maybe, just maybe, a crack beginning to form in the system that had turned its back on me. Later that afternoon, my phone rang. It was Graham Lutz, the founder of JetLink, long since retired. "I just heard," he said, his voice tight with emotion. "Tell me this is a mistake." "Not according to Brent," I replied. "They said it was mutual," he scoffed. "It wasn't." A pause. "You ever heard of Atlas Meridian Air?" he asked. "Private charter out of Austin, growing fast. They're looking for someone to overhaul their training program. I told them about you." "Graham, you don't have to say yes, but don't say no until you hear them out." That night, I sat in my quiet kitchen. Divorced, daughter off at college. No one left to ask me why I looked like I'd been hollowed out. I opened the envelope. The severance was fine. The legal terms were typical non-compete clause, non-disclosure, all designed to keep me silent. But I wasn't angry. I was tired. And underneath the fatigue, a slow-burning clarity was beginning to take shape. They didn't just fire me. They freed me. And they had no idea what that would cost them. The next morning, I woke before sunrise. Old habit. Military, then airline, then just life. I poured a cup of coffee, opened my front porch window, and stared at the sky as it shifted from dark indigo to pale orange. I wasn't supposed to be home today. I was supposed to be in the air guiding Flight 7041 to Portland, helping a new first officer land in light crosswinds, debriefing afterward in the terminal before prepping for a red-eye back. Instead, I sat in sweatpants, phone on silent, watching the world move without me. But then it buzzed. "Rachel K., we're in the lounge, you should come." I didn't want to. I should have turned the page, signed the envelope, and started the slow process of rebuilding. But I didn't. By 8:45 a.m., I was back in the parking lot of JetLink headquarters. Not as an employee, just a man walking towards something unfinished. When I walked into the pilot's lounge, the room fell silent. Not just Rachel and Noah, but 16 pilots at least. Some I trained years ago. Others I'd flown with. All looking at me not with pity but purpose. "You're not supposed to be here," Rachel said quietly, but there was a half smile under her words. I gave a shrug. "Neither are half of you." "Thomas called in fatigue," Noah said. "Dana too," Rachel added. "And I'm not fit for duty today." Apparently, I'm emotionally compromised. I blinked. "You're staging a walkout." "No," Daniel said, standing near the back of the room. "We're documenting valid operational concerns under FAA guidelines." He handed me a printout paragraphs of procedural violations. Reduced simulator hours. Inadequate rest buffers. Substituted maintenance intervals. All recent. All linked to the new optimization model. "Safety isn't a number," Rachel said. "But they're pretending it is. And we're done pretending," Noah added. I looked around the room. Uniforms, flight bags, coffee cups, familiar faces. But this wasn't casual support. This was resistance. Just as I opened my mouth to respond, the lounge door flew open. Brent Layton stood there, tense, sweating slightly. He was clearly caught off guard by the number of pilots in one room. "Why are none of you prepping for rotation?" he asked. No one spoke. He pointed at Noah. "Flight 123 to San Diego. Gate D3, now." "I've submitted a fatigue report," Noah said evenly. "That's a pattern," Brent muttered. "This is coordinated obstruction of airline operations." Daniel crossed his arms. "No, this is federal regulation. We're voicing safety issues. Just because you don't like the timing doesn't make it illegal." Brent stepped closer. "Captain Morgan is no longer employed here. He doesn't speak for JetLink." "I don't need to," I said. "They already know what's wrong. You're just ignoring them." The tension in the room shifted, thick, charged. Brent's authority only went so far. And today it was cracking. "We'll see what the CEO has to say," he snapped, pulling out his phone. "I hope so," Rachel said, "because we have more." 10 minutes later, the elevator opened. Julian Lutz, JetLink's 35-year-old CEO and son of founder Graham Lutz, stepped into the room with two board advisors behind him. He looked polished, young. Not cruel, just completely disconnected from what it meant to wear wings. "What's going on here?" he asked, tone clipped. I stepped forward. "Your pilots have filed formal concern about operational safety, including but not limited to training cuts, rest period violations, and questionable maintenance protocol." Julian looked at Brent. Brent shook his head quickly. "There's no proof of that." Rachel cleared her throat. "I'd be careful before you say that again," she said. "We pulled logs. Simulator time has been down 27% over 4 months. And she turned her laptop toward Julian. "Here are 6 maintenance reports. Each one originally flagged for critical inspection, later reclassified as minor advisory. After being pushed through a new platform your team authorized." I watched Julian's eyes scan the screen. He paled. "This needs to go through official channels," he said. "We tried that," Daniel said, 3 weeks ago. "And the month before that. We got silence in return." "This meeting is over," Brent barked. "Everyone back to their assignments or face disciplinary action." No one moved. Rachel straightened her shoulders. "This is now a formal safety stand-down per FAA provisions. No flights will depart until a full review is conducted." The next 2 hours were chaos. Julian tried damage control. Brent threatened suspensions. Pilots kept arriving, trickling in from rotations, layovers, day-offs. Word spread fast. By midday, nearly 40 pilots had checked in. They weren't loud. They weren't unruly. But they were done being ignored. At 1:15 p.m., the JetLink legal team entered with security escorts. Julian walked toward me. "You've made your point," he said. I said nothing. "You'll never fly for this company again." I smiled faintly. I wasn't planning to. Then I turned and left, escorted out like a trespasser. But this time I didn't feel small. In the parking lot, I opened my phone. A new message from Graham Lutz. "Call me. It's time." I did. "Atlas Meridian wants to meet tomorrow morning," he said. "And Reed, don't sign anything from JetLink. Not now. Not ever." I got in my car and stared at the rearview mirror. Behind me, pilots were still standing their ground. Ahead of me, a new chapter was waiting. This wasn't just about a job anymore. It was about taking back what they tried to take from me: dignity, purpose, pride. They thought silence would be the end of me. Turns out it was only the beginning. By the time I got home that night, my house was too quiet. I sat in the living room staring at the manila envelope Brent had handed me just that morning. It sat unopened on the table. A severance offer. A non-compete clause. A price tag for my silence. I didn't touch it. Instead, I picked up my phone and dialed Elias Zhang, the CEO of Atlas Meridian. Graham had already spoken to him, but I wanted to make that first connection myself. He picked up on the second ring. His voice was clear, grounded. "Captain Morgan," he said, "I've been expecting your call. I wanted to speak to you before we meet tomorrow," I said. "There's more going on here than just a firing." I figured, Elias replied. "JetLink's stock price doesn't dip 10% in a day over a retirement." I told him about the stand down, about the flight logs, about the altered maintenance reports. He didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he asked only one question. "Do you have the documentation?" "Not personally," I said, "but I know someone who does." That someone was Rachel. I drove across town and met her in a diner just off Central Avenue. The kind of place with cracked vinyl booths and waitresses who called you hun. Rachel was already there, laptop open, coffee half drunk. She slid the machine across the table when I sat down. "What am I looking at?" I asked. She tapped the screen. "Here's the original maintenance report for JetLink Aircraft 441 scene. Nose gear vibration flagged as critical. Required inspection within 36 hours. She clicked a tab. "Here's what was filed with the FAA, downgraded to advisory. Follow-up pushed 96 hours. Final report marked complete without logged inspection." I leaned back. "How many?" "That I've confirmed 11 aircraft. Most within the last 5 months. I exhaled slowly. "And this started when?" "Right after they switched to the new maintenance logging system. Brent's system." "Who has access?" "Operations. Upper maintenance leads. And executive oversight." I looked at her. "You know what this is, don't you?" "Yeah," she said softly. "It's fraud." We didn't talk much after that. The weight of it settled between us, heavier than anger, heavier than betrayal. This wasn't about me losing a job anymore. This was about a company cutting corners so deeply it could cost lives. Rachel closed the laptop and handed me a USB drive. "Backup copy," she said, "in case they try to wipe the servers. You sure you want to be involved?" She met my eyes. I'd rather be unemployed than complicit. The next morning, I was at Atlas Meridian's headquarters by 8:30. Their building was sleek, modern, tucked just outside Austin. Glass walls, clean lines, the scent of fresh paint still lingering in the lobby. Elias met me personally. He was in his late 40s, calm, sharp-eyed, the kind of man who listened twice before speaking once. We sat in a quiet conference room on the top floor. He didn't ask for my resume. Instead, he asked for the story. I gave it to him, everything. The cutbacks, the silence, the manipulation. The loyalty JetLink had demanded and the disrespect they'd repaid it with. When I finished, I placed the USB drive on the table between us. "This is your leverage," I said. "Use it carefully." Elias didn't touch it. "We're not vultures," he said, "but we don't ignore opportunity. JetLink has been eroding their culture for years. What happened to you? It's just the tipping point." He slid a folder across the table. Inside is an offer. Head of Training Operations. You'll report only to me. Full authority to build our program from scratch however you see fit. I opened the folder. The numbers didn't matter to me, but the title did. Director of Flight Development and Safety. I closed it slowly. "What about the others?" I asked. "The ones standing behind me." Elias smiled. "How many pilots do you trust?" "At least 30. Then we'll make 30 positions. Later that day, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. Captain Morgan, the woman on the line, said, "This is Lisa Brennan, safety inspector with the FAA. We received a report about falsified maintenance records at Jetlink Air. I understand you might have supporting information." "I do," I said, "but the documents are in the possession of their head flight instructor, Rachel Kim. She's the one who discovered the discrepancies." "We've reached out to her as well," Lisa said. "Would you be willing to provide a written statement to supplement the investigation?" "Absolutely." By the time the FAA showed up at Jetlink's headquarters the following afternoon, word had spread. Pilots started calling in. Fatigue, schedule misalignment, unresolved safety concerns. Flights were canceled. 39 by nightfall, 64 by morning. By the third day, Jetlink's website was full of red banners and delayed notifications. Their PR team issued a statement blaming unanticipated technical issues. But it wasn't working. Passengers weren't angry at weather. They were angry because the people they trusted to fly them didn't feel safe flying anymore. On the fourth day, I got a message from Rachel. FAA took the logs. Full audit in progress. Legal team's been scrambling. And then a second message. Brent's gone. Julian stepped down this morning. Board asked him to. I read it twice. It didn't feel like victory. It felt like gravity, the kind that finally drops after holding your breath for too long. That evening, I called Graham Lutz. "Looks like Jetlink finally hit the wall," he said. "They built it themselves," I replied. "You still planning to meet with Atlas Meridian?" "I already did." "And?" I signed. There was a long pause on the other end. Then Graham said something I'll never forget. "They threw you out like dead weight, Caleb, but you were the ballast keeping that whole plane steady." I sat in the dark after the call. No music, no lights, just me, the quiet hum of the refrigerator, and a flicker of something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not anger, not pride, readiness. Jetlink had lost the heart of its crew, and now they'd have to learn what that meant. 3 days after I signed my contract with Atlas Meridian, I stood on the tarmac of their training campus just outside Austin, Texas. The sun was just breaking the horizon. Orange light spread across the polished concrete, catching the windows of a brand new Embraer jet parked near the hangar. I watched the ground crew do final checks, meticulous, unrushed, focused. It reminded me what this was supposed to be about. Not speed, not numbers, but trust. I walked through the main training facility, clean white walls, new simulator bays humming quietly, and briefing rooms waiting to be filled. Elias joined me with 2 coffees in hand. "You sure about today?" he asked. I nodded. "They need to see what we're building. They trust you, Caleb, but this is a leap. They've made bigger ones." At 9:00 a.m. sharp, the front doors opened. The first to walk in was Rachel. Civilian clothes, flight bag slung over her shoulder, quiet determination in her step. Behind her, Noah, Daniel, Dana, Thomas. One by one, they filed in. By 9:15, there were 32 pilots in the room. Every one of them had turned down their next assignment at Jetlink. Some had already resigned. Others had walked away mid-schedule, citing safety concerns or misaligned values. None of them smiled as they entered. They weren't here for celebration. They were here for integrity. We gathered in the main training hall, surrounded by 6 full-motion simulators and rows of high-tech briefing stations. Elias stepped forward. "Thank you all for coming. I won't speak long. You didn't come here for speeches." He gestured toward me. "You came here because of this man. Because what they discarded, we value. What they ignored, we build with." The room was quiet, but the air buzzed with something electric. Elias smiled. "You are not employees. You are founders. This isn't just onboarding. This is a beginning." After he left, I stood before this group. I didn't have notes. I just spoke from where the weight had been sitting. "You all know why we're here," I said. "Not because we're angry. Not because we want revenge. We're here because we believe flying is still a craft, a responsibility. And somewhere along the line, Jetlink forgot that." I paused, looking around. They forgot what it means to be part of a crew. What it means to trust the person next to you with your life. More than one head nodded. I continued. "This isn't about sticking it to them. This is about building something better than they could imagine. A place where pilots are heard. Where training means something. Where we don't cut corners to save pennies." I took a breath. "You don't owe Jetlink anything anymore. But you owe yourself peace. And this is where we start finding it." By week's end, the transfer process was in motion. HR finalized contracts. Schedules were drawn. Housing assistance set up for pilots relocating to Austin. Some brought their families. Some left in the middle of messy conversations back home. A few were fighting off legal pushback from JetLink threats of contract violation non-competes, but not one of them turned back. JetLink tried calling it an unexpected wave of departures. Internally, they called it a loyalty crisis. Publicly, they said nothing. But the cracks were starting to show. The FAA audit continued. Their inspectors uncovered more than maintenance manipulation. They found scheduling logs showing rest violations, email threads of internal pressure to close tickets fast, memos signed by Brent encouraging creative resolution protocols. Within 10 days, JetLink grounded 12 aircraft. Within 2 weeks, over 100 flights were canceled. Passengers turned to social media demanding answers. Former employees shared their stories. By week 3, national media picked it up. JetLink executives resign amid allegations of safety cover-ups. FAA investigation expands as pilots leave en masse. The airline that chose numbers over people. I didn't speak to the press. Neither did Elias. We didn't need to. The work was louder than the headlines. In Austin, our training center was alive. Pilots walked the halls with purpose again. Simulators ran from morning to evening. Procedures were reevaluated, not rushed. Flight scenarios were rebuilt not for cost, but for mastery. Rachel redesigned the emergency prep modules from the ground up. Noah began mentoring first officers, something JetLink had cut months ago. Daniel and Dana helped create a fatigue reporting system where no one had to justify their limits. What JetLink called overhead, we called safety. One afternoon, while reviewing new scheduling protocols, I got a call from Graham Lutz. "You watching the markets?" he asked. "No. You should." I walked into the nearest break room, turned on the screen, and tuned into the business channel. JetLink's stock had dropped 46% in less than 3 weeks. Their board had issued a formal apology. They'd grounded nearly a third of their fleet. And now, according to breaking headlines, Brent Layton had been terminated, effective immediately. Julian's resignation had been accepted by the board just days earlier. Graham chuckled lightly on the other end of the line. "They're trying to fix the cracks now," he said, but the walls were already hollow. I turned off the screen and looked out the window. One of Atlas Meridian's new jets was being prepped for its maiden voyage to Tokyo. It shimmered under the sun, brand new, sharp-lined calm. Rachel would be piloting that flight. She walked across the tarmac with her crew behind her, quiet, confident, grounded. They didn't look like rebels. They looked like professionals finally in the right place. That evening, I stayed late in the training wing. Alone, I walked the simulator bays, touched the cool edge of the flight controls, and remembered what it used to feel like when I first started flying. The fear, the focus, the faith. Somewhere JetLink had lost all three, and now they were paying the price. Not because I took anything from them, but because they refused to value what they already had. 6 weeks after I walked out of JetLink for the last time, I found myself back on a tarmac. But this time, I wasn't watching planes I no longer flew. I was watching something I helped build from the ground up. Atlas Meridian's training program was now fully operational. We'd onboarded 32 former JetLink pilots, launched our revised safety and performance protocols, and activated 4 new long-haul international routes. The facility, once a collection of blank rooms and possibilities, had become a working ecosystem of calm competence. In that short time, we'd earned coverage in 3 aviation journals, been contacted by major corporate clients, and received a letter of commendation from the FAA for organizational transparency and early partnership. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel like I was holding the line. I felt like I was shaping the horizon. That morning, Catherine Kim, now promoted to Director of Crew Training, returned from a successful charter to Copenhagen. The Dreamliner she piloted touched down with surgical grace. As she taxied toward the hangar, I stood watching from the observation deck beside Elias. "She's sharp," he said. "I taught her that final reverse thrust sequence myself," I smiled. "She's better than you now." "Not possible," I said with mock seriousness. "But I'll allow the debate." We both laughed. The kind of laughter that comes not from ease, but from knowing you've rebuilt something honest. "You ever miss it?" he asked, gesturing toward the runway. "Flying?" "No, fighting." I paused. Not for a second. Later that afternoon, Catherine found me in the operations office. "You've got a visitor," she said. My brow furrowed. "A visitor?" She handed me a small envelope with an embossed seal on the corner. JetLink's logo. I opened it slowly. Inside was a simple typed letter. Dear Captain Morgan. On behalf of the JetLink board, we would like to formally request a meeting to discuss a leadership role in reestablishing operational integrity within our organization. It was signed by Harlan Price, the newly appointed interim chairman, the same man who once praised Brent's restructuring as innovative. 2 days later, I sat across from him at a neutral meeting room in Dallas. I'll be blunt, Caleb Harlan said. We need help. Our trust with the public is fractured. Internally, morale is non-existent. Half our senior pilots are either gone or mentally checked out. The FAA hasn't grounded our fleet yet, but we're one missed audit from losing our license. He looked tired, worn down. We want you back, he said. Name your terms. I sat still for a moment. The room was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I thought of Brent's face when he said my compensation no longer aligned. I thought of Rachel scouring maintenance reports in silence at a diner while the system around her crumbled. I thought of every captain who showed up in Austin that morning not with protest signs or speeches, but with bags packed and integrity intact. And I thought of the Dreamliner waiting for me next week set for a charter to Tokyo. A route I'd chosen to fly myself, not because the company needed me in the cockpit, but because some things you never give up. I appreciate the offer, I told Harlan, but I'm not coming back. You'd have full autonomy, clean slate. We've removed the people responsible. It's not about revenge, I said, and it's not about pride. Then what is it? I leaned forward. It's about knowing where I belong. He didn't argue, didn't beg. He just nodded, slowly, and I walked out. That night, Elias joined me at a small dinner gathering with the newly formed Atlas Meridian leadership team. We toasted not to victory, but to clarity, to knowing what matters, to holding the line long enough to build something better on the other side. Catherine gave a short speech thanking every pilot who had taken the risk to leave behind comfort for principle. When she mentioned my name, I waved her off. This isn't about me, I said. But she shook her head. No, this is about us, but someone had to take the first step. A week later, I stood in the cockpit of the Dreamliner bound for Tokyo. My uniform jacket was new. The wings pinned to my chest were different. But my hands moved across the controls the same way they always had, steady, sure, familiar. Catherine sat in the right seat. You ready, Captain? She asked, half smiling. I glanced out the window at the fading horizon. Always. As we lifted off, I felt the gentle pull of ascent, not just the plane, but everything else. Everything I'd held in for too long. Everything they thought I'd leave behind in silence. I never returned to JetLink. But I heard through industry chatter that they managed to survive barely. They rehired contractors, outsourced training, issued public apologies. They'd spend years trying to rebuild their reputation. Maybe one day they'll get close. But not because I came back. Because I left. Because I chose differently. Now, when people ask what happened, I don't tell them about the firing. I don't tell them about the severance or the spreadsheet logic or the CEO who never flew anything heavier than a suitcase. I tell them this. I spent 16 years proving myself to people who never asked who I was. And the day they finally looked at me, it was too late. They'd already lost something they didn't understand. And I'd already found something better. Every time I take off now, I remind myself, I'm not flying away from anything. I'm flying toward it. And this time, I'm exactly where I'm supposed to be.